All right. Hi, Shannon. Thank you
Hi.
so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you straight from your closet in Iowa.
Yeah, the glamorous life of the podcasting circuit. Thank you for having me. It's fun.
I love how the pandemic has made it just like so normal to be in see people in their closets and
Oh, yeah.
no makeup, sweatpants. Like I put on mascara the other day and I was hopping on a Zoom call and someone was like, "Wow, you look so nice." I was like, "Oh, I just like put mascara on. It's just really low bar."
Totally low bar. Right. I actually just put eye makeup on for this call, even though your listeners are not seeing my face, but you're seeing me. So there's one person I'm going to wear eye makeup for.
I did the same thing. I actually hosted a Zoom call prior to this and I had no makeup on. And
Same.
then, but to talk to you, I was like, I need to put this on.
Someone that you've never actually met, you got to step it up a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I am very excited to be here with you. Shannon is the author of Rewilding Motherhood, which I have right here next to me. I'm obsessed with this cover, by the way. It's beautiful. Who designed that?
An artist named Rosanna Tasker. She's an illustrator, and you should look at her Instagram because she is just phenomenal. So I was so excited when they gave me a few choices of people to choose from for the cover, and I loved her work. And she's just so good with nature. And I knew that I wanted the cover. The cover had to be kind of wildish and feminine, and she was the perfect person. I love it so much. So thanks. I'm glad you like it too.
Oh yeah, it's definitely my background's in graphic design. So I'm definitely a visual person. And when I saw this, I was like, everything, the title, the beauty, the nature, all of it. And so the tagline here, or I guess, would you call it a tagline for a book? I don't know.
Subtitle. Yeah.
Subtitle. That's it. Is your path to an empowered feminine spirituality, which I love. I am a mother of two. I have a 10-month-old and a 2.5-year-old. And I don't think I've ever read a book about motherhood or like mothering or anything. Not that I've like said, this is my boundary, I'm doing this. I don't think anything has really appealed to me. I think especially in, my background being Christianity and in the Christian motherhood world, I don't know. I just feel like things can get kind of strange. And I haven't read one. So your book is the first book that I've really read that I've loved and even read in at all about the subject of motherhood. So your book just really spoke to me. Really the first chapter, I think I had goosebumps and was like tearing up because I felt so seen on such another level, as a mother who has my own creative pursuits and desires and yet loves being a mom and loves my kids. But also felt like there was this part of me that I couldn't express in the same way that I had expressed post kids, and almost feeling like there were these new things that were bubbling up in me through being a mother. But I was like, and I'm very much in this. Oh, how do I express these things? I have no time. I have, crusty food all over me all the time. I feel like a hot mess. My brain's in 18 million places at once. So your book was just a breath of fresh air. I actually did a lot of the reading of it outside, like on my porch when I had some time. So it was really, really nice. But I'd love to hear you. Can you talk a little bit? So in the first chapter, you talk about this dream that you had. Can you, for those who haven't read your book, can you just describe a little bit about that dream, how you introduced the book?
Yeah, I'm a dream fanatic. I dream a lot and I love learning about how to interpret those dreams. And so, in my long and winding history, the way that I make sense of my dreams now has changed a lot from the way that I did in the past. As I've learned and grown, like I mean, I'm no dream expert for sure, but I'm just very interested in how our unconscious reveals itself through that. And so in this dream, I have a neighbor, an actual neighbor and friend, dear friend of mine, who is a textile artist here in Iowa, Catherine Reinhardt. And she was in my dream, and she was across the street at her house, like dipping fabric in a process that I was assuming was a dyeing process, which she had done before and I had seen her do before in real life. And she was getting, she started with a small basin, and then she moved to something larger. She moved to a kiddie pool. She just kept needing these bigger and bigger containers for this project. And finally, there was sort of this unveiling of this Olympic-sized swimming pool in her front yard that was just, it looked bottomless. It was completely, you couldn't see where it ended. And so I'm watching her do this kind of from afar. And then I realized that some of my children have run across the street. And I start panicking because there is this like treacherous cliff essentially of nothingness that they could fall into. So I'm running from them to get them, and there are like hornets all over the ground, and I'm like stepping in them in my bare feet, trying to save my children from this, from kind of the danger at hand, but at the same time really mesmerized by the process that my friend is going through and her art making. And I woke up and I journaled about it, as I do with dreams that feel meaningful to me. And I took it to my spiritual director and we talked about it. And what I realized was my friend in the dream represents me, but it also kind of represents the every woman, every mother. And water in our dreams represents our unconscious states. And so it was incredible to unpack that and realize that what my unconscious was doing was yearning for bigger and bigger and bigger containers, for my creative life, for my spiritual life, for the parts of me that wanted to come alive. And yet there is this tension, right, of having to look out for my children and making sure my children are okay, and they have to be on the forefront of my mind. And it just seemed to sum up motherhood so well that I just had to use it like right off the bat in the book and be like, if this is how you feel, then you're going to like this book. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then you're probably not going to like this book.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was really grateful to have that kind of metaphor at hand, and it felt really appropriate with this idea of rewilding motherhood, of how can we honor the fact that we are the protectors and defenders and nurturers of our children. Like, that is incredibly important. And yet there's also this part of us that existed before them and will exist long after them. And how do we also nurture that,
Mm-hmm. Ugh, even hearing you say it, it's like gives me goosebumps because it's just I think I just so resonate. I so relate. And I'm one of those people that, yeah, I was like, this is for me. That is how I feel. Yeah, there's this desire for that infinite, that pool and the art and the creativity, everything about that. And yet protecting your kids and even the hornets. And like, there's so many roadblocks, it feels like, when it comes to being a mom and diving into those parts of ourselves. And I think especially right now, mothers are so overloaded and tired with the pandemic. I mean, we're recording this in February 2022 here. And yeah, so exhausted.
There are like these groups of moms that are getting together to just scream in like football fields. Have you seen that?
No, but I think that is such a great thing. I'm so happy people are doing that.
There was like one group that was like reported, I don't even remember what state it was in. And then it's kind of catching on and people are doing it just to go yell and scream. I'm like, that seems really healthy for us right now.
I think that is very healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. I've actually started doing that in my car.
Yeah.
And you inspired that too, because you have a chapter in your book called Outrage
Mm.
and talking about mother's anger and women in general about, anger and how we feel like we're not supposed to feel it. And I love just how you took the word. Well, can you talk a little bit about that? Since we're talking about screaming in football fields and screaming in my car, I don't even know if I finished that sentence, but I've started driving around and just screaming in my car and letting it out like unbridled screams. And it feels kind of scary. I've definitely scared myself at times to hear my own voice, but
Right.
also
But
very
there's
healing.
I think there's something really important about that, about encountering a part of yourself that can scare you. Because I think that we spend so much of our time being contained and being socially appropriate and being acceptable, to even in private, even when no one is looking, but we have this idea of what the boundaries are. And so to scream in your car to a degree that frightens you, I feel like there's something so fiercely like raw feminine energy about that, of like, I'm going to go against every message that I have inhaled over my lifetime over how a woman should act. And it's in a safe place, right? You're not doing it, to the stranger on the street corner, whatever. You're not unhinged, but you're getting it out. And I think I think we need to encounter our own power and our own intensity, because we can just domesticate it so much that we lose the preciousness of it. And so I think that we have to kind of find our own individual ways to get in touch with that. I recently read this book, Night Bitch. Have you heard of this book?
Night Bitch?
Yeah, it is
Ooh.
so good. This is a tangent, but
I love it.
it's by another mother author here in Iowa, and it's fiction, but it's about this woman who has like a toddler and basically kind of convinces herself that she's turning into a dog, and she feels sort of crazy, like a wild, like a rabid dog, and but it's like this really interesting, almost fairy tale of her getting back in touch with her just like organic wildness. And
Wow.
some of it is disturbing almost, but it's also so relatable, of like, oh my gosh, there's part of me that just wants to run naked in the woods too.
Yeah,
Like it's like,
100%.
yeah. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. I think that you would probably
Okay.
like it.
Definitely gonna go buy that right after
I
this
think it's
recording.
Rachel Yoder. I could be wrong, but I think it's
Okay.
Rachel Yoder.
Oh man. Yeah, there's something I feel like you even reference it in your book. I might be wrong though. The book Women Who Run with Wolves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, yeah, I think just the title feels even empowering. I do think that there is such um such a wildness that exists within us, that is connected to nature, that's connected to the earth, that we have so tamed and put down. And I think something really amazing about motherhood is it brings these physical primal parts of us up that we haven't really been in touch with. I through my pregnancy, and if you're listening to this, and depending on what your journey has been with your body, I think there are other ways to connect with our bodies, not just through pregnancy or motherhood necessarily, but from my experience, I connected with my body on a completely new level after being pregnant. And that has really stuck with me. And it wasn't anything I had control over. I just all of a sudden realized I have this wisdom that exists within my body that I have never been consciously aware of, that had the ability to do these amazing things. And I was really looking forward to having a very like having a really connecting with my primal female instinct through my birth experience. And I could record a whole nother podcast on how my births went, but it was like completely like plan F, that how they went down. I like wanted a birth center. I had like my playlist ready and my oils, and I was like gonna be so zen and like connecting with my primal self. And I had an emergency C-section, and it was just, there's lots with that for both of my children. But there is this part of motherhood that I think in one way or another connects us to this like wisdom that exists within our bodies that has been passed down. And you think about mothers from generations back and these traditions that have been handed to us. So I think there is something really beautiful about motherhood awakening these wild parts of us.
I totally agree. And I think, like you said, there are so many ways and things in our life that can kind of propel us to have these moments of being shaken awake. And so it doesn't have to be motherhood at all. But I think that there is something unique about motherhood in that experience, because I think it does shake something loose in us, like you said, of like kind of this awareness of how creaturely we are, and a desire to really embrace that. I mean, there are times when I have like wanted to lick my babies, you know what I mean? I'm just like just full on mammal. And I think it awakens something so deep within us that it is tied to our creativity and is tied to like this generativity of what it is to be a woman. And so there obviously is always a connection to our spirituality and that too. So it's like this multifaceted awakening. And yet, more than any time in your life, you are now totally overwhelmed by practical needs. You have no time, no margin, no energy, no sleep. Like you have no way to create any sort of healthy container to process this experience. And so I think that's, what makes those early years of motherhood so maddening. And so many of us, myself included, need the assistance of, medication to get through those years, because there's just so much, and our bodies are going through so much, and our minds and our spirits are. My youngest is 2.5 now. And so I feel like my oldest is 12. I feel like I'm sort of on the other side, or coming to the other side a little bit, of like getting kind of clear-headed again, to where I feel like I have, suddenly I kind of have energy and interest in being able to explore those parts of myself. And which is part of the reason why I wrote the book, was because I kind of felt like the fog was clearing, and I could suddenly look at some of these things head on. And it was really a delight to do that. But yeah, I think it's such a tricky time, because so much is awakening and so much is dying at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I'd love to hear more about that process for you, of how you decided to write this book. Like how did you even do it? You have 4 kids, right? 4?
I have
5. You have 5. Wow.
I know, I'm nuts.
Well, tell me about the process. Like, how did you decide to do this? Like, what was this like?
Yeah. I was kind of like you in that I'm not really a big like mom book person. When I first became a mom, I sort of tried and rather quickly realized that I didn't really resonate with really at least the Christian mom books that I was reading. It was hard to see myself in them, I guess. And so I just really haven't touched it for like a decade. And then I had this experience writing somewhere, and I'm not going to go into all the details, but basically kind of got like patriarchy kicked me in the face, essentially. And it was this time of awakening, this was probably 3 years ago now, time of awakening to my inner self that had sort of been lying dormant, and things that I had been okay with that I realized I wasn't okay with as a woman, and I wanted to get back in touch with that. And suddenly, like, all of the ways that my religious and spiritual experience had been informed by men and shaped by a masculine spiritual culture, I just kind of reacted against that and was like, suddenly I just wanted to devour anything about the sacred feminine, about the feminine aspects of God. You know, I'm Catholic, so I really dove into the Virgin Mary and even the archetypes surrounding her. And it was so healing for me. And so I think it was at that point that I sort of realized that um my own, and I think a lot of women's resistance to things that are overly feminine or things that are exclusively about motherhood is actually internalized patriarchy,
Mm.
because I was really kind of devaluing that and playing it down, and like, oh, it's not really that much of who I am, because I don't want to be less than men. You know, like, I want my work to be taken seriously. I want my work to be read and evaluated and commented on by men, because that means it's worthy, right?
Mm.
And so it was a really intentional practice to write something that was just for women. And I am happy to say there have been many women who are not mothers who have read and loved the book as well.
Mm.
Um, and so, but I did use motherhood because I felt like in my life and in the lives of many women, that specifically is where we begin to make ourselves really small.
Mm.
And or maybe it's not fair to say begin, but that's maybe the most obvious time that we begin to shrink and lose
Mm.
ourselves and stop voicing our needs and stop um, listening to ourselves and
Mm.
honoring that. And so kind of became curious about how to reclaim those things and reclaim a healthier spirituality, and even more than that, just a way of being in the world, a way of creating, a way of healing, and then creating healthier systems for our children.
Mm. Wow. Yeah. Ugh,
That was a
so well
mouthful.
said. No, it's like so many things that you said. I feel like, yeah, with motherhood being a time that a lot of women can start that process of shrinking and the patriarchy and wanting that validation from men about our work, and oh, so many things. And it's like, yes. So what did you like? I'm curious because we have a community of entrepreneurial minded women, I say, because not everyone's necessarily running a business, but they have a mindset of entrepreneur, the mindset of an entrepreneur. When you had this awakening, it sounds like, and you really started diving into this, at what point were you like, I'm gonna write a book proposal? Or like what was the like action step that you took to then saying, I'm gonna like take this stirring that's within me and bring it into a tangible
Yeah. Yeah.
thing?
I love the whole ethos behind your community. It's just right up my alley, because I'll, I love how you describe that, because I'm not an entrepreneur in the literal sense of like owning a business, but I have had to be as a writer to kind of make my own opportunities, make my own way, establish myself. Um, and so I had written pretty prolifically, and I had one book published by a small Catholic publisher. In this process of writing this book, I actually got the rights back so that I own that book now, because just like there were different ideological differences that I just wanted to separate myself from. And so now I just sell it like on Amazon. But so I had that under my belt, which was a plus. You know, I had a lot of experience. So it's not like I just randomly decided to write a book one day. I was thinking about what my next book would be, what I would write about next. But it was definitely quite different. It was definitely a different like it was a sharp left turn, I guess you would say, as far as the voice of the book and the content and just my posture in writing it. I'm trying to think. Actually, it was a very specific moment. I haven't told the story in like a year, but it's actually a very specific moment. And this is going to sound very woo, but I believe that you can handle it.
Oh yes,
You
bring
seem
it.
like
Bring
you're
the
not
woo.
off put by that. But I was thinking about this. I actually had begun a discussion about writing this motherhood book for a different, very lovely, very in alignment with myself, small Catholic publisher, a different one. It was wonderful. They were great. They could not pay me a lot. And I was sort of back and forth about it because it was safe. It was certain. I knew it could get out there. I knew pretty much exactly how much I would make. There wasn't a lot of risk. Why not? But there was something in me that was like, you should just look for an agent and like pitch it to like bigger publishers. And so I was kind of back and forth on this. And during this time, I'm just laughing at myself because I wrote a book called Rewilding Motherhood, and this is the story that I'm telling. But during this time, there was this robin couple that was building a nest and laying eggs in our garage. And every day I would take at least one or if not multiple of the kids, and we would go check and see how they were doing. And the robins would like gripe us out in their adorable little way, but they wouldn't, bother us, and we wouldn't bother them, but we would just kind of check. And so like we would celebrate as, eventually there were 4 eggs and one of them fell and I put it back in the nest, but I was like, it's not gonna hatch, and then when it finally did hatch, we were all celebrating. So we were just very invested in this bird family. And then one day I went out there, and they hatched and they were just darling. And then one day I went out there and they were gone and the nest was on the floor, and I just found one dead baby bird on the cement floor of the garage.
Gosh.
And I just cried, and my son was with me, and he was like, I was trying to help him make sense of it. And the mother robin came in, and she went to the nest, and then she went to our double stroller. Like, how metaphorical can you possibly? And she just stood there and she was just like tweeting her little heart out. Like she just wanted to tell us her story. And it was probably a raccoon, we think, or something, because we kind of live in an area with lots of raccoon and foxes and stuff. And anyway, so we buried the one baby bird that was left. But I was so moved by all of this and by the mother robin, and I just knew that I had to go for it, that I couldn't do the safe thing, that I needed to put myself out there. And so I did. So I wrote another chapter. Then I like sent it to an agent, and my agent I sent it to several. One of them said yes, and she is phenomenal. I love her. And then so that's how it happened. She helped me pitch it to some places, and I got an amazing, offer with Brazos Press, who has just been phenomenal to work with. And anyways, it was so perfect for this book because it's such like a like an earthy story, an earthy way to come to writing a book called Rewilding Motherhood, that it's almost cliche, but here we are.
That is, oh my gosh, that is such a beautiful story. Like, I had goosebumps that whole story, because
I'm glad, because I always feel kind of half crazy. Like, people are going to think I'm off my rocker. Like, why was this so life-changing? But it was just one of those things of just like, I just knew what I had to do. I don't know.
And that was the moment you knew.
Yeah.
It was like the divine speaking through that mama bird, like that
Yeah.
mom. I think that it's so beautiful in so many ways, because that mama robin, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. She was like speaking to you and telling her story, and in turn it encouraged you to tell your story. And she went through this like loss, this awful, you know, gosh, it reminds me of like the whales when you watch
Yes.
like Blackfish when they took the baby away and the
Right. Oh
mom
my
was just
gosh.
wailing and it was
Yeah.
like heart-wrenching. I think about that. I haven't watched that documentary in years and I think about that often. Just like this, I mean, it's going back to what we were talking about, like this wild like connection that we have,
Mhm.
and it's nature, it's otherworldly, and wow. And that was what like gave you that little dose of like, okay, I'm gonna go for it.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's made me more attuned, like, to not separate my work, um, and, my spirituality, or my work and my, um, ordinary life, because everything is always informing the other and always speaking to the other. So I just want to be really aware and attentive to the ways that the divine speaks in forms and symbols and material things that we would never expect, but it can really guide us and direct us in creating meaningful work in our lives.
Mm-hmm. And I think what's beautiful too about your story is that you were a part of, your kids were also a part of that experience. Like they were there with you. And I think that our culture, and I think we've internalized this, we think like, work has to be over here. Whoops, dropping things. Work has to be over here, motherhood over here, separate, compartmentalize. And, there's times for that. Sometimes we need to engage different parts of our brain, but I love like the merging of that. And as we lean into being ourselves as whole people and expanding who we are, that includes our families and our relationships and our partners and all these roles that we play, all these hats that we wear, and having them come together. And I think it's also beautiful because you're showing, just from that one story, you're showing how you can still connect to your creativity and connect to your divine, or to the divine, with your children in tow as
Yeah.
well. And it might look different than it did pre-kids or
Mhm.
before, but it's still possible. And even your
Yeah.
connection to this mother bird, oh, it's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. One of the best pieces of advice that I got was from my friend Laura Finucci, who's also a writer. And she told me a few years ago, so much of writing, and I think people can translate this for any field of work that they're in, but for us, so much of writing happens when you're not actually writing. You're thinking about it all the time. You have these
Mm-hmm.
ideas, you have inspiration, you make connections all during the day. So she was like, the best thing you can do as a mother who is also trying to have this creative life is to pay attention to that, to pay attention to and use, while you're doing dishes, the things that come to your mind, take a second and write them down or whatnot, because there is no real, going off to the wilderness for 9 months to write a book. Like nobody, no mother at least is doing that. And I mean, for your listeners too, whatever it is that is bringing them creative energy in life, it's so few of us have the luxury of just removing ourselves from everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
But finding ways um to bring it in, to
Mm-hmm.
incorporate it. And I think it makes us more integrated people. It makes us probably much healthier people, rather than this dream world where we could go off for X, Y, and Z amount of time and do the work and then come back into our real lives. I think the work is better when it's saturated in real life. And I think we're better humans when we have to figure out a way to do it. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, like you said, there is a time for like hiring a babysitter and getting space, or working a full-time job and your kids in daycare. Like there's nothing wrong with that. We
Mm-hmm.
all get ample opportunity to integrate our everyday life. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, it looks different.
Yeah. Yeah. and I'm kind of like realizing this as you're talking, but I think that I've been talking a lot about embracing inefficiency
Mm,
and how our culture has like so glorified productivity, efficiency, um, milestones hit, like
yeah.
outcome, like so tied to like the outcomes. And I think we've lost a lot of our ability to just wander and be inefficient. And in those inefficiencies, that's where our mind can slow down and get those ideas, or be able to listen to nature, to the divine, to whatever you believe is like bigger than yourself.
Mhm.
um that power, our minds really have to slow down in order to hear that. And when we embrace inefficiency, we can hear that. I'm just realizing like, oh, kids are like inefficiency, like to a T, like that is inefficiency, like in so
Right.
many ways.
Yes, yes,
um
totally. Yeah, and I'm kind of right there in this season of trying to say no to more things so that I am just doing nothing with my kids, because I just feel like there are seasons, right, where we push and we go, and we create, and then there's seasons when we have to pull back, and because you can't keep creating when you're burnt out,
right.
and when you're dry, and whatever creating looks like for you. It's like we all have to have those ebbs and flows. And for me right now, I'm definitely embracing inefficiency, and it's been
Mm-hmm.
a healthy thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think as a culture, like we're seeing this, how
Yeah.
with the pandemic, so many, the great resignation, like people
Right.
are burnt out. And I
Yeah.
think it's like, okay, what do we do now? How do we engage? And one thing I loved that you talked about in your book was like our natural rhythms
Mm,
of our menstrual cycle,
yeah.
and how that I've kind of, I've heard people talking about this, but I haven't really dove into it. And there was something that unlocked in me when reading this part of your book about um, just the different rhythms and cycles that we go through and embracing them. And sometimes it's a slower time, sometimes it's more energetic time. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely still a student of this as well. I cite some helpful books in that chapter that have kind of taught me along the way, but I think there's a really kind of fascinating connection to the female anatomy and um, nature's rhythms. And I mean, that's tale as old as time there. Everybody knows that, right? That's like kind of mirrors the moon and the ebbs and the flows, but there's just something really profound about wrestling with that and seeing and actually identifying what that looks like, breaking it down small for me personally, not like, oh yeah, women and the moon, there's some connection that I vaguely recognize, but like, oh, we women with female anatomy, we have cycles of times that we are less productive, times that we have more creative energy, times that we are really strongly attuned and sensitive. And there in our fertile week is, we are feeling sensual, we are feeling alive, we have a lot of creative energy. The week before our menstrual cycle starts, when PMS, that has such a bad rap, it's honestly one thing I loved. I don't remember now where I read it, but the point of, we become so honest. We become honest with ourselves about how we actually feel. We become honest with our partners, like not always pretty, sometimes to a
Mhm.
fault, but it is a time to not write off those things. And I think so often we can, of like, oh, I'm just PMSing, I'm just, grumpy. Well, but you're also being like your most honest self right now. So what are these things pointing to? What are, yes, your feelings are more intense right now, but they're also not wrong, probably, there's truth there. So kind of exploring that. And then, you know, I, I find that the week of menstruation still kind of to be this mysterious. I'm still trying to understand what it means in my own life and like what to do
Mhm.
practically with that time.
Mhm.
I know that it's a time for rest, it's a time for self-nourishment, but like as a mother, how do you work that into your life? I don't have answers yet, but I have kind of fallen in love with this idea of identifying rhythms of my life and seeing them mirrored in the rhythms of the earth of, there is a time for harvest, there's a time for bounty, and for, in the summer we have so much energy and life pulsing through us. In the winter, we've got to scale back and rest and store up and create in the secret and in the darkness. So yeah, I just love it. And then in the Christian calendar, it really in the liturgical calendar, it kind of mirrors that because we go through Advent, which is all about birth, and then Lent, which is all about death, and then Easter, which is resurrection, and then there's the ordinary time that's after that. So and in the pagan calendar as well, we see that and reflected in the Earth cycle, and so it's a treat really to kind of discover, and I'm just now scratching the surface of it, but I'm addicted to it. I find it
Mhm.
fascinating.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, it's so interesting, and I'm finding myself just paying more attention to where I'm at. And like I'm even just thinking like where I'm at right now. And I was like, oh, I was feeling like super creative yesterday. And I was like, I said my background's in graphic design. I was like designing some stuff and I was kind of like feeling a flow. So I was like, I'm just going to go with this. And like, I have other things to do, but I feel like I'm vibing
Yeah.
with this right now. So I just like went for it and I'm
Mm.
connecting those dots. I think that it's just so interesting how it's continually coming back to the rhythms, the seasons, connection to the earth, something bigger than ourselves. And I
Right.
think whether or not you're a woman who menstruates, we can lean into these rhythms that the earth has, set for us and created. And
Yeah.
yeah, so many areas. It's really beautiful.
Yeah. And it's comforting too to realize, to have like to be physically grounded in the reminder that the hard times pass, like the worst feelings are not forever. And we know that in our heads, I think, and to a point it can become a cliche of like, oh yeah, like winter comes, but there's always spring. But when we're actually sort of immersing ourselves in nature, in the earth, and also identifying our body's own resonance with that, I think it becomes a greater comfort and a little more trustworthy to say like, oh, I see around me that this bout of depression is not going to last forever. I can believe that, even when I don't feel like it's true, even when I feel like it is going to be indefinite, like I can see everything exists in cycles, everything is a circle, and I'm going to be okay. This isn't going to be forever.
Mhm, mhm. And it's not hard because you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Like it's hard because, it's hard or you're in this season and it's hard. I think I keep going to just pandemic stuff because we're just
Yeah.
in it, and we hitting the new year. I think I've seen a lot of reflection from women in our community of just like the last 2 years and everything we've been holding and how it's so much. And one thing I just am continually reminding myself and the women in our community is it's hard because it's hard. It's not hard because you're doing something wrong. Because,
Right.
the patriarchal culture has told us to push through and our worth is based on our productivity and our worth is based on what we produce. And some seasons we can't produce
Yeah.
and that's okay. And there are those times
Mm.
and no season is, greater than the other. They're just different, but
Yeah. Yeah. I feel, well, when I heard that you lived in Southern California, California, my first instinct was jealousy, because obviously it's like perfect weather year round, right? But right now we are in the dead of winter here in Iowa. So like it has been snowy for 2 months, and it's just, we're all sick of it. But I think, I have come, I'm grew up in Texas, so I'm a Midwestern transplant. So it's taken me a while to appreciate the dead of winter, but now I'm like, what you said, it's just hard because it's hard. You're not doing anything wrong. I'm like, yeah, I look out my window and that feels so true, of like, there's no way that this isn't hard for people. For centuries, this season has been really hard, and I'm not doing anything wrong, and it's not gonna be forever. But that all around me, people are hunkered down, people are staying home, we're going to bed earlier, and there's something unitive about that, and also reassuring of that, we have to be reminded that this is the season for everything, and right now is the season for non-productivity. In more ways than one, like you're saying, with the pandemic, and just, yeah.
I do definitely take our weather for granted here, but there's a part of me that also like longs for seasons, because you get so discombobulated in your head here sometimes. Like literally this weekend, it was almost 90 degrees in February. And it was like, am I in summer? Like what? My energy levels feel like all over the place. Like I know that, I will say it's nice, the weather here, but also there's part of me that's like, oh,
yeah,
I'd love to have real seasons to
no,
feel that connection.
I feel that, because I love summer and I love warm weather so much. But when I think about not having any change, I'm like, I have kind of become so rooted in the seasons that I don't know what I would do. I feel like it would just be really, like you said, discombobulating, and I don't know how I would really handle it. So
yeah, it
the
is.
grass is always
It's
greener
weird.
on the other side.
Yes. Well, Shannon, as we wrap up our time together, I'd love to hear from you. Is there any last thoughts or bits of advice or wisdom that you would give to the women in the yellow community who are navigating all sorts of things, motherhood, burnout, distractions, who want to expand who they are and lean into these parts of themselves that they feel like have not been able to have the space to be expressed? What would you say?
Yeah. I would say trust yourself. And, we can't trust every feeling we have necessarily, every whim we have. We have to like be discerning about it. And I think the more inner work we do, the better we get at kind of distinguishing between what's trustworthy and what's not. But I think we all deep down know, or at least want to know, that the voice within ourselves is trustworthy, and that when we feel compelled towards something, especially if it's something as life-giving as meaningful work and creativity and abundant spirituality, that we need to honor that desire to make a way for that to be a part of our lives. And I think that can be a million different things and look a lot of different ways, but I think we got to honor that longing that we have, and not push it aside.
I think Brene Brown says creativity unused turns malignant, or something. That she has a better quote than what I just said, but I totally agree. Like finding a way to honor it. That's the work.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shannon, for your time. I feel like I could talk to you for hours and hours.
I know, we would totally be friends in real life.
Yes.
Anytime you want to freeze in the snow, come to Iowa.
Yes. Next time I'm in Iowa, definitely coming to hang out with you. And same to you if you're in LA area.
I will.
Also, where can we find you? How can people get in touch with you? And what's the best way to connect with you and your work?
I mostly hang out on Instagram. So it's Shannon K, letter K, Evans. And you can also find me on Twitter and Facebook, but I'm not as active there. And my website is shannonkevans.com.
Awesome. Rewilding Motherhood. Check it out, everyone.
Yay.
Thanks, Shannon.